The night was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses in on you, heavy and suffocating. I had just settled into bed, the clock ticking softly in the background when it came. A low, almost imperceptible knock at the door, my breath caught in my chest. Who could it be at this hour? The house was empty, my husband was away on business, and the kids had long since fallen asleep. I crept to the door, heart pounding, wondering if I was just imagining things. But when I opened it, there he stood, my neighbor, Mark. His face was pale, his hands trembling. "Can I talk to you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I blinked, confused, but stepped aside to let him in. That moment, so small, so unassuming, was the moment everything in my life began to unravel. But what he said next, I was not ready for. Life had been simple, or at least I thought it was. My husband James worked long hours, leaving me to handle the house, the kids, and everything in between. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough. I found comfort in routine. The kids, Sarah and Liam, were at that age where they still wanted to talk to me about their day, their little joys and frustrations, and I treasured those moments. They were growing so fast, and I knew I would blink and they'd be off to college or starting families of their own. James and I, too, had our own quiet rhythm. There was a distance between us, but it was nothing unusual. We had been married for over 10 years. The passion that once burned bright in the early days had dulled into a steady warmth. It didn't bother me at first, maybe because I had never known anything else. We were two people who had learned how to exist together without the constant need for affirmation. Or so I thought, but things began to shift in the months leading up to that night. Small things at first, just little cracks in the foundation. James had been away more often on business trips, leaving me alone for days at a time. At first I enjoyed the solitude, the silence. It gave me space to breathe. I started to enjoy having the house to myself, even if the loneliness lingered like a shadow. But then there was Mark. Mark was our neighbor, the one who had moved in next door a year ago. He was quiet, unassuming, the type of man who kept to himself. He had a teenage daughter, Emily, who was about Sarah's age, and the two of them sometimes played together after school. But Mark was different from other neighbors. He never had the typical conversations with me about the weather or the neighborhood gossip. He would wave from across the street, but that was about it. It wasn't that he was unfriendly, but there was an air about him, something withdrawn, as if he didn't want to be noticed. Still, I never thought much of it. People are just people, I told myself. There's no reason to read too much into them. But one evening, a few weeks before James was set to leave on another of his extended trips, I noticed Mark was outside, standing at his front door, staring at my house. It wasn't unusual for neighbors to watch each other sometimes, especially in a quiet neighborhood like ours. But there was something different about the way Mark was watching. It wasn't just curiosity, it was an intensity in his gaze that unsettled me. I thought I imagined it, shrugged it off, and went inside. It wasn't long after that when I started to feel it, his presence, lurking just at the edge of my awareness. He would show up outside when I was taking the kids to the bus stop or when I was pulling the trash bins to the curb. It wasn't anything overt. He wouldn't speak to me, but his gaze would follow me, just enough to make me uncomfortable. I should have said something to James, but I didn't. Maybe I was embarrassed, or maybe I just convinced myself that I was overreacting. Besides, it wasn't like anything was happening. He was just a neighbor, but that was the problem. Nothing was happening, and yet it felt like everything was about to. It was as if the calm before a storm had settled over me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then came the night when everything changed. James had left the night before for a business trip, and the kids were already asleep. I was in bed, reading a book to distract myself from the gnawing discomfort that had been growing in me. That's when I heard the knock. It was just a knock, but for some reason, it felt like a warning. And when I opened the door to find Mark standing there, something deep inside me shifted. I had no idea then, but I would soon learn that my life, the one I thought was simple, was about to shatter in a way I never expected. Mark stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. His presence was heavy, like the air before a storm, thick with tension. I closed the door behind him, the click of the latch sounding far too loud in the quiet house. I led him into the living room, my pulse racing, unsure of what was going on. He sat down on the couch without a word, his hands resting nervously in his lap. His eyes never left the floor, his jaw clenched as if he was trying to hold something back. I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of the situation. What was he doing here? Why was he so anxious? "Can I get you something to drink?" I asked, though I didn't want to be polite. I wanted him to leave, to walk out that door and never come back. But there was something in his eyes, a pleading, almost desperate look that made me stay. "Number I just—" His voice was barely audible, strained. "I need to tell you something. It's about my daughter, Emily." The mention of his daughter caught my attention. Emily and Sarah had been friends for months now, but I had never heard anything that would make me think something was wrong. They spent hours together, riding their bikes, doing homework, or hanging out at the park. "What's going on with Emily?" I asked, my voice gentle, though a tight knot formed in my stomach. Mark exhaled a shaky breath and ran a hand through his hair. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with guilt, and then quickly looked away. "It's not Emily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's about me, about what I've done, and what I've been feeling." I froze, my mind racing. What was he talking about? What had he done? I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My body was already responding to something in the air, a sense of dread creeping in, though I couldn't yet place why. He stood up abruptly, pacing in front of the window. He was agitated now, his words spilling out in a rush. "I know this is wrong. I know what I'm saying is going to make you think I'm crazy, but I can't stop. I've tried, believe me, I've tried, but I can't. It's like I'm losing control of myself." His voice cracked on the last words. "Mark, please," I said softly, my chest tight with confusion. I wasn't prepared for whatever this was. "You need to calm down. What are you talking about?" He didn't respond, just stared at the floor, his breathing heavy. The air between us felt thick, charged with something I couldn't name. "I can't stay away from you," he muttered, his eyes lifting to mine. "I've tried, but it's like I can't stop thinking about you. You've been so kind to me and Emily, and I've come to realize that I—" He stopped himself, his mouth snapping shut. There was something dangerous in the way he looked at me now, something raw. I took a step back, instinctively, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck rise. "No," I said, my voice trembling, "you can't." But it was too late. He was already moving closer. I tried to keep my distance, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. My heart pounded in my chest as I backed up, bumping into the coffee table. Mark was right there now, standing so close that I could feel the heat of his body, his breath on my face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening to me, but I can't control it anymore. Every time I see you, every time I hear your voice, it's like something inside me snaps." His words were almost too much to process. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I wanted to scream, to push him away, but my body froze, caught between fear and confusion. "I never meant for this to happen," he said, his voice breaking. "I know this is wrong, but I can't stop. I've been watching you. I've been watching your life, and I—" He stopped himself again, swallowing hard. "I want to be with you, and I know it's insane, but I just had to tell you. I had to let you know what's inside of me, what's been growing." I could barely breathe. The room was spinning. His words kept repeating in my head, a dissonant echo. He was in love with me? No, that couldn't be it. This was something else, something darker, something dangerous. I took a step back, shaking my head. "No, Mark, this isn't right. You're not thinking clearly. You need help." My voice cracked as I tried to steady myself. "Please just leave, go home." But he didn't move. Instead, he reached out, his hand trembling, his fingers brushing against my arm. The touch sent a shock of fear through me. "I can't leave," he said softly, almost pleading. "I need you to understand. I can't control what's happening to me. I've tried, but every time I see you, it just gets worse." I could feel the walls closing in around me. The house, the air, everything felt suffocating. I had to get out of there. I had to get away from him. Mark, please, I whispered, barely able to hold it together. You have to go. You're scaring me. Finally, he stepped back, his face a mask of anguish. He didn't say another word, just turned and left. The door closed behind him with a soft thud, and I stood there for a long time, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't know what had just happened. I didn't know how to feel. But one thing was certain. I had just learned something about Mark I could never unlearn, and somehow I knew this wasn't the last time he would be standing at my door. The days after Mark's visit were a blur, each one blending into the next like a series of muted snapshots. I couldn't shake the feeling of his presence, lingering in my mind, in my home. His words echoed constantly, and no matter how I tried to push them away, they wouldn't leave me. I can't stop thinking about you. Those words, those hauntingly desperate words kept circling in my mind. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself I could handle it. Maybe it was just a moment of madness on his part. Maybe he was struggling with something personal, some kind of emotional breakdown that would pass. That's what I tried to believe. But deep down, I knew I wasn't fooling anyone. Not myself, at least. James was due home in 2 days, and I clung to that thought like a lifeline. He would be here, and things would go back to normal. At least, that's what I hoped. But as I went through the motions of daily life, I noticed something. Every time I looked out the window, Mark was there. Not always, but enough for me to feel the hairs on the back of my neck rise. His eyes would be on me, always from a distance, always watching, but never approaching. It was the quietness that scared me the most. There was no confrontation, no outburst, just an unsettling calm that gnawed at my insides like something terrible was waiting to happen, only I didn't know when. Then the knock came. It was late, the house was dark, and the kids were asleep. I had just finished a bath and was in the middle of reading when I heard it. Soft, tentative at first, then louder, more insistent. The knock on the door. I knew even before I stood up that it was him. My heart raced, my breath shallow. I shouldn't open the door. I should call the police, or James, or anyone, really. But I couldn't move. I just stood there for a moment, frozen, as the knock came again, sharper this time. My fingers trembled as I reached for the handle, and when I pulled the door open, there he was. Mark, standing in the moonlight, his face pale, eyes wide with fear, his hands shaking. He wasn't calm this time. His energy was frantic, his movements erratic. I had to see you, he stammered, stepping inside without waiting for me to invite him. The door barely closed behind him before he was standing in front of me. I've been thinking about this for days. I can't keep doing this, living like this. I can't stay away from you. I stepped back instinctively, panic flooding my chest. Mark, please, you need to leave. Now. My voice was shaking, but I forced the words out, hoping he'd listen. I didn't know what was happening, but I could feel the air in the room thickening, pressing in on me. His eyes were wild, desperate. I can't stop thinking about you. I've tried, but every time I look at you, Stop, I shouted, the words bursting out before I could stop them. Stop it, Mark. You're scaring me. This is wrong. Everything you're saying is wrong. But he didn't stop. He reached out to grab my arm, his fingers cold and unyielding. His grip tightened as I tried to pull away, my heart pounding in my ears. Mark, please, let go. I cried, but he only pulled me closer, his face inches from mine. I can't help it. He was pleading now, his voice breaking. I need you more than anything. His words hit me like a wave. I could feel the desperation in his touch, the weight of his need pressing against me. But it wasn't just that. It was the fear, the panic that gnawed at me, that told me something was terribly wrong. I was scared, not just for myself, but for him. There was something inside of him that had broken, and I wasn't sure it could be fixed. Suddenly I heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. I knew that sound. It was James's car. My heart skipped a beat. The door was still wide open, and Mark was standing there holding me, refusing to let go. Mark, stop, I said, my voice pleading now. James is home, please, leave. He'll be here any second. For a brief moment his face flickered with hesitation. But it wasn't fear. It was something darker, something I couldn't name. He didn't let go. His grip only tightened, his eyes narrowing. "Number, I don't care," he said, almost with a touch of finality. "I can't lose you. Not now, not ever." Before I could react, I heard James's voice from the driveway calling out, "Honey, I'm home." Mark's eyes darted to the door, and for the first time, I saw him hesitate. He stepped back just a little, but he didn't leave. The tension in the room was unbearable. I could hear James approaching the front door, and panic surged through me. If Mark didn't leave now, I didn't know what would happen. My mind raced, but there was no clear way out. "Mark," I whispered, my voice trembling, "please go." Now. But his expression was unreadable. He turned to face me one last time, his voice low and strained. "I didn't know if I was shaking from fear or relief, as if the words were a promise and a threat. James was all inside now, and standing just as quickly as he had come, he was gone. "What's going on? Run.
Who was here?"
He didn't hurry. I opened my mouth stepped outside, but no words came out. Quiet on the porch and disappeared into the night. How could I explain what had just happened? I slammed the door shut, heart racing, but then, panic as I turned to look at him, I saw the look in his eyes, the way his gaze lingered on my face, like he was seeing me for the first time in ages. And for a moment, just a fleeting moment, I wondered if I could tell him everything, if I could make him understand the storm that had just passed through our lives. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready, because I knew, deep down, that the worst was still coming. For days after that night, the world felt like it was on pause. Mark's presence had invaded every corner of my mind, and I couldn't shake the images of his desperate face, his trembling hands, the way his breath had hitched when I told him to leave. I replayed the events over and over in my head, questioning myself, wondering if there had been something more I could have done to stop him from spiraling. What had I missed? Had I seen the warning signs earlier and ignored them? James noticed that something was off. He kept asking me if everything was okay, if I was all right, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him what had really happened. I couldn't put that weight on him. Not yet. I was already carrying it, and it felt like a burden I wasn't sure how to share. I told him it was just stress, the kind of tension that comes with life being busy, with him being away. The problem was, I wasn't just stressed. I was terrified. Every time I walked into a room, I half expected to see Mark standing there waiting. His absence only made his presence feel stronger. I kept the blinds drawn, the doors locked, and every sound outside made my heart race. I could still hear his voice in my head, feel his touch lingering on my arm like a cold ghost. The idea that he would come back haunted me, like a shadow I couldn't escape. At night, I found it impossible to sleep. The house, once so familiar and comforting, now felt foreign, like a prison. I couldn't relax, couldn't let my guard down. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the truth was I wasn't sure what Mark was capable of anymore. He had crossed a line, and now I was scared of what would happen next. James, for his part, seemed distant. I tried to put it out of my mind, telling myself it was just a result of him being gone for so long. But when I looked at him, I saw the same uncertainty that I felt inside myself. He wasn't the man I had married. He was distant, withdrawn, like he was somewhere else emotionally, even when he was right there beside me. We spent days together, trying to get back into our rhythm. The kids went to school, and I ran errands, cooked meals, and pretended everything was fine. But the cracks were everywhere. Every time I saw Mark's house across the street, my heart would lurch. Every time I walked outside, my eyes would scan the street looking for him, waiting for the moment when he would show up again. But he didn't. Not yet. I didn't know how to act around James anymore. I didn't want to lie, but I couldn't tell him the truth. He would never understand. Mark had made it clear that whatever was happening between us was something I had to deal with, not him. And so I kept it to myself, burying the fear, the shame, the guilt deep down inside. I pretended that everything was normal, even though nothing was. Then, 2 weeks after that night, it happened again. It was late in the evening. The kids were in bed, and James was in the shower. I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television. The house was quiet, too quiet, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I heard it. Again, the knock at the door. I froze. My breath caught in my chest. I knew, even before I looked through the peephole, that it would be him, Mark. But I couldn't let him in. Not this time. I hurriedly backed away from the door, my heart pounding, my mind racing. The fear that gripped me felt like a vice around my chest. What did he want now? Why couldn't he just leave me alone? He had made it clear that he was not going away. I thought back to the look in his eyes that night, the desperation, the intensity. It was like he was begging for something I couldn't give him. And I was afraid that in his mind, that meant he had the right to take it. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I can't let this happen again, I told myself. I can't let him control me. But before I could make any decision, the knock came again. Louder this time, more insistent. I grabbed my phone and dialed James's number, my fingers trembling, but he didn't answer. My pulse raced and I felt my throat close up. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to do something. I had to stop him before he came inside. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move. As quietly as I could, I backed toward the hallway, my eyes glued to the door. There was no way I was going to open it. Not when I wasn't sure what Mark would do. Then, just as I reached the hallway, I heard him. His voice from the other side of the door. "I know you're in there," he said, his voice low and calm, almost too calm. "I just want to talk. Please let me in. I need to explain." I didn't move. I couldn't. I wanted to call the police, but I didn't know if I should. I didn't know what he was capable of, and if James found out what had been happening, how could I explain? How could I explain that my neighbor, someone I'd once shared casual conversations with, had crossed every line in the book? That I had allowed it to happen? I was shaking now. The fear was consuming me. It felt like the walls were closing in on me, the house shrinking around me. Just then, I heard the door handle turn. My heart nearly stopped. Mark was trying to get in. I bolted for the nearest phone, James's phone, and quickly dialed the police. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to explain it, but I didn't have a choice. The operator answered, and I rushed through the words, my voice trembling. "Please, please, I need help. There's someone at my door, and I don't know what to do. He's been stalking me, and I'm scared he's going to break in." The operator assured me help was on the way, but as I hung up, the panic only grew. What if it was too late? What if Mark was already inside? What if in his mind, this was just the beginning? The knock came one more time, this time softer, almost apologetic. "Please," he said again. "I'm sorry, I just need to explain. Just open the door for a minute." I stood there, frozen in the hallway, not knowing what to do. My body was trembling, my mind reeling with 1,000 questions. What did he want? What was he going to do? And could I stop him before it was too late? It was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. The police eventually left, their cars fading into the night. Mark was taken, though I had no idea what would happen next. Would he get the help he clearly needed, or would he continue to spiral deeper into this obsession? I didn't know. No one could promise me that he wouldn't come back. That fear, that constant tension didn't just vanish when the door closed behind him. I sat there, alone in the silence that followed, my hands shaking, my mind reeling. There was still a part of me that wanted to go back, to pretend like nothing had happened, to go on with my life like I'd been doing before that knock, but I knew I couldn't. It was too late for that. The door had been opened, and nothing would ever look the same again. James tried to comfort me, but there was something about his touch, something about the distance in his eyes that told me he didn't fully understand what I'd just been through. How could he? How could anyone? The fear I felt wasn't just for myself. It was for the life we had built. The house I had once thought was a sanctuary now felt like a place full of cracks and shadows. Was it safe anymore? Could I ever truly feel safe again? Would I always be looking over my shoulder, wondering if Mark was somewhere just out of sight watching me? The worst part was, I didn't know. I didn't have the answers, and maybe that's what haunts me most of all, the uncertainty. Because in the face of all that had happened, there was still the question that lingered in my mind. What if I wasn't the only one? What if there were others, people who had been in situations like mine, where everything felt off, but no one said anything? Or worse, What if I had missed something? Signs that could have stopped all of this before it even started. And that brings me to you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have faced Mark, confronted the fear, and called for help? Or would you have ignored the warning signs, hoping they would go away? Would you have trusted your instincts, even when they made you question everything around you? I can't help but wonder how many people out there find themselves trapped in situations like this. Moments where the line between what's normal and what's dangerous gets blurred, and no one is willing to say what's really going on. Where fear and guilt tangle together in a way that makes you question your own judgment. This wasn't just about Mark. This was about me, and the way I allowed myself to stay in a situation I wasn't prepared to face. I think about that night, about the words he said, about how I couldn't even bring myself to fully understand them at first. How could I have known that something so small, so seemingly innocent, would escalate to a point where my own home felt unsafe? How many times had I ignored the signs, convinced myself I was overreacting? And maybe, just maybe, that's the most important lesson in all of this. To trust your instincts, to listen when something feels off, to not let fear keep you from speaking out or asking for help. There are no easy answers, no clear lines in these kinds of situations. But if there's anything I've learned, it's that the silence we try to bury it under can often be the loudest thing in the room. It can consume us if we let it. If you've ever been in a situation where something didn't feel right, where someone crossed a line, I want you to know you're not alone. We don't always have the strength to face it head-on in the moment, but we can find it in ourselves eventually. Even if it feels impossible, please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced a situation like this? What did you do? And if you haven't yet, how do you think you would handle it if it happened to you? I'd love to hear your stories. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that explore the moments we fear, the ones that leave us questioning everything. Because sometimes the scariest part isn't what happens. It's wondering if we can ever truly escape it.